this is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? There might be somebody in the background there cooking. I don't usually make videos in the middle of the day, in the middle of the house, so we'll see how this goes. But it's June, and for the first time, I'm going to participate in June on the Range, which is an event that was started by Michael K. Vaughan. What do I do with my drink? I think there's a lot of co-hosts, maybe. And it focuses on Westerns. And then I saw Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading, her June TBR, June on the Range adjacent list. And so that inspired me. I mean, it made me start thinking about all the Westerns that I've read. And so I went around gathering books to talk about that I just happen to still have. Because I am an East Coast girl. I was born in Washington, D.C. I've lived in Northern Virginia for 60 out of my 64 years. I spent 1 year in North Carolina in Charlotte, and I spent 3 years in Baltimore. So that's like the state below Virginia and the state above Virginia. So it's not like I've strayed far. But I have traveled to the West. My husband once was offered a job in Los Angeles, and we went out there for 2 weeks to check it out, and we decided against it, of course, because, we're still here. And let's see, I got to go to San Francisco and Los Angeles when I graduated from college, and I went to Denver for a few days, and then I got to go again to California, San Diego, on a conference with my husband. And then we did the 2-week LA trip a few years later. And then I've been to Texas 3 times, I think. Is that right? I went with him on a conference, and I think we went to Houston and, I think we went to Houston and San Antonio. I remember the Riverwalk. That was really charming. And we got to the Alamo just after it closed. So we just walked around the grounds. And then my oldest daughter went to school in Dallas. So I took her there. And then for her graduation, I flew with her when she went the first time, when she was settling in, and then we went for her graduation. So I've been to Dallas twice, and where else have I been in the West? A few years ago, my husband had a conference in Phoenix, so I got to go to Phoenix. That was really fun. And then the last trip that I've taken out west, most recent was last summer, to Montana. So anyway, I really am, but all my life I've really enjoyed books set in the West. So I'm going to talk about childhood favorites, and then I'm going to talk about the Western books that I've enjoyed as an adult. So when I was growing up, we had this old copy. This is the same copy of The Red Pony by John Steinbeck in my room. And I read and reread this book. It's all scribbled on. I reread, can you see? There's the scribbling. This story over and over again. And this is set in, I guess, Southern California, Salinas. This was wonderful. I really, look, I'm not ashamed, this old book. It's so charming. We scribbled on it. So I think this is the first Western that I remember, which is probably a little bit, you don't think of John Steinbeck writing children's books. They're more like short stories. But look, I drew a tail. That's drawn on. Yeah. Anyway, so this was my first memory, and it really captivated me. And so I was quite open to books set in the West that seemed very romantic to me. Being from Virginia, we have one of the famous children's books set in Virginia is Misty of Chincoteague. And so I read that, I don't know, maybe I was in 4th grade or something. And then I went on to read all the Marguerite Henry books. And I read, this is not this edition. I got these for my kids, and I don't think they ever took off. But they're still sitting on my shelf somehow. But this is Mustang, Wild Spirit of the West. I remember I read that. And this I really loved. I still have never made it to the Grand Canyon. I used to listen to the Grand Canyon Suite by, I forget whoever the composer is. And I was in love with the idea of the Grand Canyon. But I do remember reading Bridie of the Grand Canyon as a kid. And then I remember I was really into those American childhood books. This is an old one. But I remember as a child reading this particular book. I bought this many years ago at a used book sale because I remembered reading about Lotta Crabtree, Gold Rush Girl, when I was a kid. So the Gold Rush, that was really an intriguing topic for me. So this book I remember reading, and by the Great Horn Spoon. This was a great book, and we did read this to my kids. I know we read aloud to some of the kids, and I think some of the kids read it on their own too. But this is the story about a young boy who goes on a ship to get to San Francisco in 1849 for the gold rush. So this was a great book. As an adult, I discovered this book, Moccasin Trail, by Eloise Jarvis McGraw, and it was a wonderful read. Now, where was it set? I read this years ago. Is it in Oregon? Okay, so this is set in Oregon. So this is a wonderful book. Even though I read it as an adult, it was quite good middle grade book. Moccasin Trail. And then I have a bunch of books that I had never gotten to that are kids' books. And I just somehow collected them, and then I'd never unhauled them. So this is Brave Buffalo Fighter by John D. Fitzgerald. He's the same guy who wrote the Great Brain series. My kids love the Great Brain series. These are all set in Utah. They're Mormon. And this is a book that he wrote that I bought years ago and have never read. So gotta wait for middle grade March to come around. Maybe I'll do a Western theme. I got this used book, Wyatt Earp. I remember my parents going to Arizona and coming back talking about Wyatt Earp. And like they went to, where is it? Tucson? Is that where it happened? Tombstone. Yeah, I love these old books, so. So I should get around to reading about Wyatt Earp. This is Up the Trail from Texas. I remember when my oldest daughter was going to school in Texas, I wanted to do like a unit study on Texas for the younger kids so they would know where she was since she was so far away from us. But I never did get around to it. That was the story of my life. But I love these illustrations. So anyway, Up from Texas, that would be good. Know a little bit about Texas history. The story of Geronimo. Now, I have no idea how this presents indigenous peoples. But it's by Jim, I don't know how you say his name. I say Kilgard. He wrote Big Red and Irish Red, a bunch of books about Irish setter dogs. And I think those were set in like upstate Maine or something among the lumberjacks. I'm trying to remember. I really love that series or those books when I was a kid. And then when I was at a secondhand shop years ago, I saw this book. So I decided to get it because it's by that author. Never read it. And then Riders of the Pony Express. Now, I remember reading about the Pony Express. I might have read this book when I was younger. Pony Express only lasted like a year, 18 months or something. It was incredibly short, but it was really mythic. But this is by Ralph Moody, who I'll talk about later. But yeah, I hear people walking around. Anyway, those are books that I'd like to read. Kids, middle grade books, and never gotten to. Is somebody coming in? No. Okay. All right, so these are books that I've read as an adult that are, I consider them Westerns. Here's somebody, oh yeah, they're going in now. So let's see. I don't have the book Shane. I remember reading the book Shane as, probably a young adult. I remember really liking it. I think it was a library book. And I saw the movie, and the movie isn't as good, I don't think. I think the book was better. But I don't have Shane here, but that is one of those classics. Of course, True Grit. I remember seeing the John Wayne movie first, and then going out and getting this book. And I've read this a couple of times since. And then they came out with a newer version with who played Rooster. Was it Jeff Bridges? I can't remember who, but I could barely understand him. He had such a gravelly voice. It was a lot edgier. It was good, but it was edgier than the kind of corny John Wayne one. Anyway, the book is better than both the movie. Very good book. Where was this set? Texas. Okay, the West is so big, right? I mean, you think about Texas and then Arizona and Colorado, California, and then up into the prairie states. Well, that's what I should have brought out is, I think, really the first Western. Well, I read The Red Pony really early, but I think of Laura Ingalls Wilder. Oh, I meant to get out The Long Winter, because some of those are set in something on my face. Some of those are set in the Dakotas, and that to me is definitely the West. I don't have that to show to hold up here, but The Long Winter is my favorite one out of that whole series, and that's really shows the hardships of a really bad winter on the prairie. Anyway, this big classic, and again, I saw the miniseries with Robert Duvall first, and then that made me go out and get this, and I think I've read it twice. And of course, this is now a modern Western classic. Excellent book. Then I've got my Willa Cather, and it's so funny that I just finished watching Christy Lewis's latest video, and she was saying how she thinks she's going to DNF my Antonia. I always say my Antonia, but other people pronounce it differently. Anyway, this is not the copy I read originally, but I happened to get this at Barnes & Noble a few years ago. But this is one of my favorites. This is set in Nebraska. This is one of my favorites. I mean, I absolutely adore this book, and I've read it several times. I read this with my teens when we were homeschooling high school. Excellent book about immigrants to the prairie states, I guess. And then this also has the same theme about immigrants to the Nebraska prairie. And Willa Cather actually was born in Winchester, Virginia, which is just about an hour from here. I have a sister who lives there. So I have a little bit of a connection to Willa Cather. And there's actually a drive called Cather Drive or something. There's a street named Cather. I always wonder if it's connected with her. Anyway, so yeah, that's two of the Willa Cather books that I think of as Westerns. And then there's Death Comes to the Archbishop. This, though, is set in New Mexico. This is a good thing. This is absolutely wonderful book. Absolutely. I love Willa Cather's writing. I think it just shimmers. It's just beautiful. Her writing is so beautiful. So those are more Westerns. Now, I have to talk about My Friend Flicka. So My Friend Flicka gets a bad rap because everybody thinks it's just about young girls in love with horses and horse riding and stuff. That's what Hollywood's done to it. But the original story, and it's actually a trilogy, and I just bought secondhand the third book because it's been missing for years, and I decided I was going to take care of that. But the first one is My Friend Flicka, then it's Thunderhead, then it's what's it called? The Green Hills of Wyoming? What is the last book called? Let me see if I can find it. These are really old editions. I've got here 1941. So it's just gorgeous. So so these came out, and they're really about a boy named Ken who lives on a horse ranch in Wyoming. And I read it as a, probably 12 or something when I first read it. But it's also the story of a marriage. It's really, adults can read it too. It's not a kid's story. It's just a beautiful depiction of ranch life and the tensions in this family and this young boy coming of age. It's just a wonderful, wonderful story. And then it continues on with this book, Thunderhead. Thunderhead is the son of Flicka. And it's also just a wonderful, wonderful story. And then the last one, whatever it's called, The Green Hills of Wyoming, that's not quite the right title. But that's the last one. And I've read that one before, but only once. These I've read, My Friend Flicka I've read many, many times. Thunderhead I've read several times. And I think the last one, whatever it's called, I've only read once. So it was about time I bought it. So I just bought it from Thrift Books. And I had to pay some money to get the hardcover. I'm hoping it's of the same set. I'm not sure, but since these two were in hardback, I wanted to get a hardback edition of it. So so I'm really looking forward to that coming in. I don't know, I might have to read that somehow, squeeze it in June somehow. Then a couple other ones I want to talk about. I discovered The Travels of Jamie McFeeters by Robert Louis Taylor. This, I think, was made into a movie. I think it was really popular in the 50s, maybe. I thought it was a fantastic story. When did it come out? 1958. It's not the greatest depiction of the First Nation people, and it definitely doesn't depict Mormons well. But if you can forgive that, it is such an exciting story. Again, kind of like the Great Horn Spoon. Am I saying that right? I can't talk. I'm tired today. Yes. It's the story of a boy who goes to California for the gold rush, but he's traveling over land, not on a boat, not on a ship. And it's his adventures going in a wagon train over the country, and all the adventures that they have. And it's just one adventure after another. It's a page turner. It's funny. It's got a little romance in it. It's really, really fun book. You do have to forgive certain things in it in order to enjoy it. But if you can do that, it's a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. I just noticed that. Anyway, I highly, highly enjoyed this with the caveats that I've said. And then the same guy that wrote the Great Brain series and the Buffalo book for kids wrote an adult book, but it's kind of real gentle. Papa Married a Mormon, and I think this is his sort of memoir, or it's like fictionalized of his life. So his mother was Mormon, his father was Catholic, and this is the story of his childhood and his parents. Basically his parents' love story and his childhood and with his brothers. And so this was a really fun adult book to read by John D. Fitzgerald. So I enjoyed that very much too. And then just recently, I think since I've been on BookTube, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was right before I got on BookTube, but it wasn't that long ago because I've only been on BookTube since the end of 2019. So, but the Little Britches series. So this is supposed to be for children, and children can read it, but adults enjoy and get a lot out of it too. This is the first in the series. I got the others on my Kindle, but I've read the whole. I decided to go through and read all the books. Now, I don't think I read this last one, Stagecoach West. So this is there's a list of the books. Let's see if we can. There's a whole bunch of them, and not all of them take place in the West. This one starts out in Colorado, and then the next one is also in Colorado. Then the other ones, the Fields of Home, the Home Ranch, those are, I can't remember the titles now. These are out of order. The family goes back to Boston and New England for a while. So there's a couple of, that basically we're tracking his life since, how old was he when this first started? Okay, when he's 8. So the series starts when he's 8, and he goes, and it talks about how they were trying to be ranchers in Colorado, and then how they had to go back home to Boston and to New England, and then how he gets sent out west again on his own when he's a very young teen, like 16 or 17, I think. And then he's, I think he's in Texas, or, yes, and he becomes a stuntman for the cowboy movies that they're, the silent ones that they're turning out. And then he winds up in a town in the West somewhere. I'm forgetting what state, and how he makes it there. Now, I don't think I read this last book, Stagecoach West, so maybe I need to do that. Anyway, fascinating books. A lot of talking about technical skills, the hard work they had to do, and all the different skills and crafts that you needed to survive. They were very, very poor. He goes into a lot of technical stuff like that, and it's kind of fascinating. So it's not just like a narrative. There's a lot of like factual stuff packed in that I really think made it really, really interesting. So yeah, so Little Britches, this whole series is a great Western series. And then what was the other one that I was thinking about? Two others that I don't have. The Virginian, which I read a long time ago, only once, I think. But that was really good. Again, there's a connection there between somebody coming from Virginia and going out west. That's also in Wyoming. And then, what's the other one? Riders of the Purple Sage. I read that a few years ago by Zane Grey. And I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was good. It also had really bad depictions of Mormons. And I can't remember about the Native or First Nation people. But I was pleasantly surprised by that. But then I read another book by him called The Spirit of the Border, which I thought it was going to be like the Texas-Mexico border. But no, it was set up in, like, I forget now, Michigan or something was the when that was the border. And it tells this true story of this terrible massacre. But I really didn't like it because Zane Grey changed who did the massacre. Actually, like historically, it was British troops that did it, but he made it be the Native Americans. So he actually changed history to tell the story. So I thought that was, I mean, I can kind of forgive, stereotypical stuff because of the time it's written in, but changing facts to make Native Americans look worse, like, that just seems really uncalled for. So I really, really intensely did not like that second book by Zane Grey. However, I found in the Kindle store a collection of Zane Grey short stories, so I think I might try to read them for June on the range. I don't even have the book that I planned. Oh, here it is. The plan, I've already said this. I'm going to read, since we did go to Montana last year, I'm going to read this book by Ivan Dogue. This is set in Montana. So the West is just huge, isn't it? It's enormous. And I don't know very much about it, but I do enjoy reading books about it. All my life I have, and I continue to enjoy it. So I can't say I'm into like the pulpy fiction, those types of Westerns. I might try Louis L'Amour, or I might wait till next year to do that. But I have always enjoyed reading and watching Westerns. Last night, my husband and I watched a Stagecoach with John Wayne. So, and that's a classic. So anyway, I'm so grateful to Michael K. Vaughan for creating this event, and I'm glad that I'm finally participating in it. It's making me all nostalgic for books that I've read, and I hope to travel to the West. Every time I go out, I love it. So I hope to travel to the western part of the United States more. Because one day I have to get to the Grand Canyon. I have not gotten to the Grand Canyon. Anyway, so I hope this was worthwhile. I'm just rambling here. So take care, and I will talk to you later. Happy reading.